Hello. I'll be right back. What's up? Just waiting for Billy. I'm gonna grab some water. Be right back. What's up? Whoa! Uh-oh. Just waiting for Billy. He should be here relatively soon. I'm gonna start like going through my player pool, and then he's gonna tell me what I'm doing wrong and what I'm doing right. We kind of thought about this a little bit yesterday because at one point during the stream that we had yesterday, he was talking about like I asked him about the different approaches to quarterback for 150 max. So he sent me a list of like what a lot of the top professionals do in regards to their quarterback, and he really put it down to two different things. He said that most players will either pick 2 to 3 quarterbacks. I'll just read it. He said, on one extreme, guys pick 2 or 3 quarterbacks each week and mix up what's around them, which is more of a bet on the stack itself. And the other extreme is to have 5 to 10% exposure to a dozen or more quarterbacks and be more consistent with the rest of the lineup. More of a bet on your core. So today we're going to discuss not necessarily which one of those is better, but which one my player pool fits in better with. So he's going to hopefully push me in the right direction. So first, I can get rid of a bunch of... I don't know why Josh Allen's listed at 0%. I think that's a mistake. Well, I mean, it's obviously a mistake. They're not projecting Josh Allen for 0% ownership. So... what else should I have open? Whoops. All right. That. So Detroit at Green Bay, 49.5. Galladay is officially out. I don't think I'm playing Matt Stafford, though. So I'll get rid of Stafford. Rodgers, 5.5%. So as a starting point, I'll just leave it. San Francisco against the New York Jets. I'm not playing either of those quarterbacks. Darnold's gone. Jimmy G's gone. Daniel Jones and Mitch Trubisky. So last week, the Bears played the Lions. If DeAndre Swift catches that ball, that becomes like 25. Let's see. Full disclosure, I'm a Giants fan. Not playing Mitch. Before we go 5. Whoops. The Rams and the Eagles. I could see Goff. Not playing Minshew. I will play Tannehill. Carolina, Tampa Bay. I'm not playing Bridgewater. I'm not playing Tom Brady. I am interested in Big Ben and Drew Lock. I probably won't even need to play 5% of each of those guys. I'll just run out like the stacks that I like from there. And then give it a little extra just in case there's like a unique combination of players that fit from the salary savings of Drew Lock or something. But we'll see. Atlanta and Dallas. Dak is supposed to be really popular this week because of cash games. Probably have to match that. Matt Ryan. We'll see how those teams come out. I don't like Cousins. I don't think I need him. Buffalo, Miami. Not playing Ryan Fitzpatrick. And this is messed up, so I'll just put in 5. We did discuss that yesterday. We were saying that the way that Cam beat the Dolphins is pretty similar to how Josh Allen's going to try to do it. So I think the floor is pretty safe. So we got him at 5%. Washington and Arizona. Kyler is going to be really popular. And I think that's fine. I probably want to go over the field on Kyler. Dwayne Haskins. Let's see. Hello. That's me. Oh boy. What are you getting? Yeah. I'll take one. Yeah, give me like a number 1. The not deluxe. Not deluxe. Coke. And get garlic herb ranch. Garlic herb ranch, the sauce. Alright. Is that it? Thanks. Nice! Clutch Chick-fil-A order right there. Nothing says Saturday like streaming NFL, DraftKings, and eating Chick-fil-A and peanut butter pretzel bites. So I was going to look up the Cardinals and how they did last week against the 49ers. They only gave up 250 yards to the air, 125 yards. A lot of that probably had to do with the 49ers, though. What's the over-under there? Washington, Arizona. 46.5. In Arizona. So what could convince me to play Dwayne Haskins? One, two, three, four. I guess there's 4 plays that I don't hate. But then it comes down to how many lineups do I actually need to get those combinations. We'll leave him in the beginning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Hey, what's up?
Hey.
All right, I'm live. So
Okay.
so no overt racism. Uh, you know how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know me.
Yeah,
My
racist
whole,
tendencies.
overt racism. I'll try to scale that back.
Nice. That's good. All right. So what I've started doing is like narrowing down the player pool a little bit. That's all I've done so far.
Okay.
Eh. Let me try to get this. I guess I could do this. All right, so I mentioned how you kind of explained the concept behind like either you're gonna play a couple of quarterbacks really heavy or you're gonna play a bunch of quarterbacks and like rotate around your core, right?
Yeah. So I guess the context for that is last year. So last year was the first year that I started playing 150 lineups for anything but NFL in particular, and I didn't really know. Sort of to one of the questions you were asking when we were chatting last night, where what should be my maximum owned quarterback, sort of how much exposure should I have there. When I was building 20 lineups or 3 lineups or 1 lineup, it's just easier, or it was easier for me to make that decision. And so to help sort of give myself a frame of reference to think about this stuff, I looked at how a group of 10, 15, 20 high stakes players who regularly play 150 lineups in these big contests go about their business. And so guys like Osimo and Chess is okay, and these guys that you see in UDCOW in every single contest that you play. And there's a, at least to me, was a surprising amount of variety in the strategy that those guys take week to week. And there's definitely some week to week variation, but by and large, the two main approaches, which each individual player sort of seems relatively consistent with week to week, was taking either having a core of guys that you have owned, and depending on who it was, anywhere between 30, 40, 50, up to 90% is your top owned guy at one of the skill positions, and then rotating a bunch of different quarterback, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end stacks around that. Another approach, which is probably less common, but some guys used, and I could put names to this if I went back and looked at some tabs here, but was to basically, you bet on 3 stacks or 2 stacks or 4 stacks every week. And you have, I remember one week that it worked out last year, I think for Ricky D, he just had Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and Calvin Ridley, 3-man, 4-man stacks, and just every possible combination, or 150 different combinations around that. Probably had 75% Falcons stacks in his overall ownership. The Falcons went off, and he had like 120 out of 150 lineups cashing, and a bunch finishing really close to the top. So I think there's a bunch of different ways to get there, and I think the spread it out approach sort of gives you a 0.1% chance of winning every week. The more concentrated approach probably has a less, your chance of winning each individual week is less than that, but the weeks when you hit, your percentage is higher. So it's sort of higher variance approach, but you can really hit a home run when you connect.
Are you more of a spread it out or a narrow it down?
At the beginning of last season, I was more concentrated. I started spreading it out towards the end of the season. I'm still figuring this stuff out for myself. This week, at this point, I think my highest sold quarterback is looking like it'll be Kyler Murray, and I'm sort of going back and forth between like 15, 16 to 20%. So that's usually where I come out on my top guy, and then I do have some variation week to week. At quarterback, I'll probably won't go much higher than that. But it, depending on the week, I might have 2 or 3 guys there around that level, or it might just be one, and then a bunch of different quarterbacks beyond that. When I was building 20 lineups, I think something I've realized more and more over time as I've played more DFS is, just it should have probably maybe should have been obvious from the beginning, is just how important it is to be perfect, to really have a chance to win these GPPs, and especially the big entry GPPs where you have a ton, hundreds of thousands of people. And so I want to have multiple iterations of quarterbacks that I like.
Yeah.
So when I was playing 20 lineups, I would usually play, I think the week where I won, I loved Drew Brees that week because the Eagles secondary was trash at that point as it remains today. And so I think I had like 6 Drew Brees stacks. I had a couple Carson Wentz stacks, and then a handful of other quarterbacks mixed up with the skill guys that I liked. But so I think, as if I was playing less lineups, I would be more concentrated because I'd want to be more, I want to have at least, X lineups of the guys that I really like. And then once I get beyond that is when I'll start, in terms of the number of lineups I'm building, that I'll start, incorporating my views on variance into my lineups as opposed to just trying to get the best.
Word. Makes sense. Yeah, because I've thought about that a decent amount myself. Like, it always feels bad when you don't play someone that you have a hunch on and then they hit and then you're not on it. That kind of always sucks. So right now, is there a position that you generally find yourself starting at, or how do you typically start? Do you start with like changing up your build restraints and like your settings and stuff like that, or do you tinker with those after you already have a player pool?
Yeah, so I have and I tinker with them week to week. It's always trying to get better, always trying to improve my process. But my build rules are, for this purpose, let's say set, and I use the same ones every week. I have different rules that I'll use based on slate size, because obviously if you get in a big slate like we have on Sunday, unless I have a quarterback involved and it's game stacking or team stacking, I don't want to have more than 2 guys usually from any game, or either one from each side or 2 from one side. It's something that typically you don't see in winning lineups in stuff I've looked at. Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of that is dictated by the number of games on the slate. If you only have a 2-game slate, 3-game slate, obviously it's impossible to avoid having a couple guys from each team a lot of the time, or in a 2-game slate all of the time. So that stuff is sort of set. And then where I first go in terms of an actual process point, not just sort of qualitative, who do I like, who's getting more work lately, and things like that, is restricting my quarterback ownership. So I'll run I use Fantasy Cruncher as my optimizer. I'll run a crunch with 150 lineups with 0 caps on the ownership of the players in my player pool, and see where that brings me out. And then we'll start by narrowing down or capping ownership at the quarterback position and seeing what that does to the rest of my lineup. My build rules are all like limiting rules. So it's don't do this. Don't play 2 tight ends from the same team. Don't play 2 running backs from the same team. The only ones where it's sort of make sure if you do this, do something else. Mm-hmm. Which if people have used optimizers, I think it's sort of the typical if and commands that you're able to set in those. are all tied to the quarterback. And so when you're restricting ownership on your quarterbacks is when you get the most, I think, significant amount of what I call optimizer whack-a-mole, where the guys that you can fit around an expensive quarterback wide receiver stack are obviously much different than the guys you can fit around a cheap one.
Mm-hmm.
So but if your first, the optimizer is maximizing your points per dollar in lineups with, subject to all the other restrictions. And if the top point per dollar stack there, and you're telling it has to have a stack, is a low dollar one, but your second one is a high dollar one, and all of a sudden, after having 75% of that cheap stack in your first crunch, you're telling it can only have that in 50% or 25% of your lineups. It defaults to that more expensive stack, which then completely changes the contours of the lineup that will be around that. So I sort of narrow down the quarterback position first, and then that is what I sort of go off of as my, expected player pool. In terms of the ownership of the rest of the player pool, I think just sort of looking at it, it changes a lot in terms of the other guys that are around that as I play with the quarterback position. But I think that's the one that has the most influence on the rest of your lineup. When I'm building fewer lineups, it'll usually be, plug it. I'll maybe pull up like 4 or 5 lineup, whatever I'm using, if I'm building in DraftKings or building it on some other site, and build like 3 or 4 lineups at a time with the specific player that I want to have in, and make sure that I get a little bit of variation around it. So, plug. If I like Zeke Elliott this week, I plug him in at running back in 3 lineups, and then differentiate around Zeke in those 3 that I have in front of me.
All right.
So slightly different approach there, depending on how I'm doing it.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, based off of what we were talking about yesterday, I think I'm going to do 150 max in the mini max. So I guess I'm trying to figure out where I want to start. So right now I'm looking at the ownership for all the different quarterbacks that are still in the player pool. So Kyler Murray's at 12.7. I have him right now at 25%. So I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if I'd rather spread it out or narrow down my quarterbacks yet. Because I'd probably want to do either 5 quarterbacks. I probably want to do 5 quarterbacks. So do you try to find different salary pockets where you like players, specifically quarterbacks, or is it more about the play itself? So you're not afraid of playing 4 out of your 5 quarterbacks in the same price range, because that's going to lead you to a lot of the same other plays elsewhere, right?
It is potentially, but this is actually one of the things I was looking at when we were messaging before. So if you look at larger slates like this, close to 90% of your winning lineups are going to have a quarterback between 5 and 7,000. Which, it's a big range, and obviously the range where most of your quarterbacks are falling. Yeah. But I'm this week, my initial runs had a bunch of Lamar, a bunch of Dak, and I want to shy away from that, just because I don't think that going expensive at quarterback is an optimal build most weeks.
Okay.
So that, again, it's a big range, but I want to be in that range, so I almost go the opposite way and have a tight window of quarterbacks. But I think the other lever there is the wide receiver that you have them with. Mm-hmm. So even though Kyler Murray is 61 and who else? Ryan Tannehill is 59. Ryan Tannehill, Corey Davis is a much cheaper play than Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins. Mm-hmm. So you can you get your different price points at other positions that way. If what you want to do is play quarterbacks that are priced nearby, I don't think it's limiting. So it's not something I really concern myself with too much.
And okay, yeah, I think I know what you mean there. So I'm going to switch up my player pool now. So based off of what we were talking about yesterday, what do you think are some of your favorite quarterback plays? I'll go through some of mine, and then you can let me know if you think I'm onto something or if I'm completely wrong and going to lose all my money. So I like Kyler a lot. I think at 6,100, not only does he have good upside, but he has a really good floor. We talked about the Redskins' pass defense potentially pushing him out of the pocket and having to scramble again, which is one of the reasons he had a really good first week. So I'm pretty positive I want Kyler Murray as well. Dwayne Haskins in the same game. So since we like Kyler Murray, is that going to make you play a little bit of Dwayne Haskins, or is that not necessarily a spot you think you have to go?
No. I think it's relevant to me as I'm evaluating Kyler Murray or any other quarterback as a play if I think the opposing quarterback at least has a chance to keep his team in the game, because that's obviously a way to keep Kyler Murray with his foot on the gas. But I don't feel like you need like I'm never saying I need to be able to play both sides of this at quarterback in order to justify the game to have a chance to get where. Yeah. So much of it's touchdown equity. We've seen games where like Kyler Murray could have a game where he goes 40 yards rushing, 2 rushing touchdowns, and 190 yards and 2 passing touchdowns, and pays off without really they're up 28-0 at halftime and put it in the tank. Low probability event, but there's just ways to get there. You can think of the game scripts where Washington does nothing and Arizona still pays off at 61 for Kyler and pretty cheap for everybody else with DeAndre.
Yeah. So we also discussed Aaron Rodgers was one of your favorite quarterbacks. I like Deshaun a lot this week. I like Drew Lock as a good dart throw. So for a player like Drew Lock, do you think right now, since the public ownership is 2%, do you think that it makes sense to match it or to go over? Because if I'm thinking to myself, I only want to play 5-ish quarterbacks, it would be Kyler 20, Deshaun 20, Aaron Rodgers 20, and then maybe sprinkle some other guys. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now.
I mean, I think it depends. I think the question is what you want to do more so than there's a rule of what to do and you follow it. So I guess one disclaimer. I think these 2 weeks, it'll probably change later as we go on in the season. If we continue to do this stuff on Fridays, but the last 2 weeks when we've done the videos, I had not started building lineups yet. This week I run one crunch just to get a sense of where things were landing. But so last week I ended up on a lot of the guys we talked about and that I liked sort of just running through the slate. But my lineups have sort of, when I'm building lineups after, I think when we're talking about it before I build my lineups, I don't necessarily have a good sense of what fits together and what doesn't, which is my prelude to saying that even though I like Drew, I think Drew Lock is probably an underrated play this week. I ended up with 0% of him even after playing with my ownerships a little bit. So I may end up with 0 Drew Lock. I might try to get a little bit, but I'm gonna really have to manipulate things to get there. Just given where he's coming out in my projections. So I think that's sort of the question for me. I think the question you asked is just an opinion one and sort of your view on the slate. Drew, he's projected for less than 1% ownership, and what I'm looking at, I can't imagine he'd be much more than that. So you can run 3, 4, 5 Drew Lock lineups and probably be over the field. If you really think he's a winning play and you want to get up around 10 or 12 or something, that's still not a ton of your overall exposure. But I think the tough thing is how do you go about that? And you might, depending on where he's coming, you could either just jack up his projections and all of a sudden he's one of your higher quarterbacks if he's not already ahead of guys in the projections that you're using in the optimizer, or you could lock him in. And I think those two and there's other ways to get there as well, that I'm probably not thinking about. But I think depending on the avenue you go to force him into your lineups within the optimizer will, in some cases, lead to different compositions around him. So I think that's the thing to play with. I think that it's sort of how many Drew Lock shares do I want? That's the opinion, and then what's the best way to go about building those in a way that fits with the rest of my 140 lineups or whatever it is, since you're probably going to have to build those lineups in a different way.
Yeah, because I guess the other thing that I'm thinking of at the same time is like, I like Drew Lock, and I like a lot of the plays that make sense with Drew Lock. So I like Melvin Gordon, like, with a full share of the workload. Like, he's going to get not every single one, but he's probably going to get at least 60-70%. Maybe Royce Freeman comes in and gets some touches, but you still have a ton of work from Melvin Gordon. We have Noah Fant, we have Cortland Sutton, and Jerry Jeudy. So those are 4 players that, like, I could limit almost all of my exposure to those players that I want to get into lineups with Drew Lock. So if I did like Drew Lock, Melvin Gordon, Cortland Sutton, Drew Lock, Melvin Gordon, Jerry Jeudy, and then like rotating like with one wide receiver, one tight end, one running back, one tight end. Like, there are a lot of ways to like limit your exposure to those extreme outcomes, I guess, where like I wouldn't really be getting much of those players outside of that game stack.
Yeah. That makes sense. And then so I have always, since I've
actually, before you answer, so it's like, it's basically the question or the idea is basically like, do you ever have the number of players from a team dictate how much you're going to play of that quarterback? Like, if you think to yourself, I think all these guys are good plays, but I only have 1% of the quarterback, maybe I need to increase that in order to have them stacked together more often and in like high upside lineups?
Yes. I think that's more to me, that like, if that's where I'm coming out, I feel like I need to maybe take a step back and reassess my view of it from a macro perspective. Because if you think all of those skill guys are good plays, then I don't see why you wouldn't want to have a bunch of Drew Lock.
Yeah.
Right. Like, if all of those guys are going to have a good game, or more than one of them are, then the quarterback probably will too, unless it's Gordon popping off for a bunch of touchdowns, and then you're sort of in Josh Jacobs territory from week 1,
Sure.
which happens, and then you're whatever, those lineups don't look great. But so if I think the answer to the question of if I love all 4 skill players, or a bunch of skill players from a single team, would I increase my quarterback ownership if I was low on that quarterback? The answer is yes, but for me, the question is like, why am I low on this quarterback in that case? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So.
And then the other thing that I just and this is more like a point for you than generally, but so I've always used Fantasy Cruncher since I've gone to an MME style, but I believe, and you said you're using Daily Roto,
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
They have I think they have like a little feature where it's like a boost, where if
the percentage boost.
So I think that would be a way to get Drew Lock in there, and I think it I think it's a great feature. I think it's a really cool option to have for these types of things, because if you're sort of to the question, and the like hypothetical question I was just asking, if the answer to that question of if I like all these skill guys, but why am I not higher on the Broncos generally, is, well, maybe Drew Lock craps the bed and they stink, then I think then adding a boost to Drew Lock is probably a great way to go about that, because it's essentially saying to the optimizer, in those scenarios where Drew Lock plays well in the game, then these guys will have that great game that they are capable of having.
Yeah.
So, give them an extra 10% or whatever. And that will sort of only force Drew Lock into your lineups when he's getting, you'll probably have more sort of, like Drew Lock plus 2 guys type stacks because they're getting that boost as opposed to just Rodgers and Adams or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So let's try to finish. Let's try to finish off the quarterbacks real quick. So Patrick Mahomes, we didn't really discuss Mahomes too much in the video yesterday. Against the Chargers, we think that the Chargers have a pretty good pass rush, decent corners. They don't have Derwin James, but a lot of people are still relatively high on the defense as a whole. And last week, Patrick Mahomes didn't have a good game. So, like, that's kind of the only reason why I think I'd play him. So, let's see. I definitely want Tannehill. I know that we discussed this yesterday as well. So, I'll go 10% Tannehill, 10% Lock. I'm going to fade Tyrod. Goff, not a huge fan of Goff, so I'll get rid of him. Matt Ryan against Dallas. So what did you think about Dallas from week 1? Was it a spot where you think that it's going to be tough to play quarterbacks against them often? Because, like, the game kind of just stalled out. And I know you mentioned that the Dallas defensive philosophy has some kind of impact on that.
Yeah, so last year I think my thing with Dallas was target tight ends and pass catching backs against them. Especially something I've been thinking about a bunch today. So we've had a decent amount of news or confirmed news that came out right before we talked yesterday into this morning. This game looks like it will be extremely chalky on both sides, and I've seen a lot of people talk about this game potentially shooting out, which if you just look at the offenses is certainly possible, but that the Dallas defense has brought in additional talent on a team that already had a bunch of talent up front, and we've talked both weeks about this Falcons defense finally being healthy and bringing in some pieces. So I still want to be on Zeke, and I'll have some Julio Jones, but I think I want to fade this game, just to get contrarian, and may I may end up going super contrarian, almost not like as a rule, but I think I'm gonna try to be under the field on Jonathan Taylor, on Corey Davis, and all these Titans. Just feels like it might be the move this week.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense, because like the way that you're talking about it with the defense is correct, and it's like you can still play Hayden Hurst, you can still play Julio Jones getting a bunch of receptions underneath, you can still play Todd Gurley for like a high number of receptions in a game, or Zeke, and you don't have to get a game stack, because like I guess because at that point you're basically asking yourself, like, is Matt Ryan going to score enough to be to dominate Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray in point per dollar and stuff like that. So yeah, I think I'm fine with that as well. So then I guess right now I have 8 quarterbacks: Mahomes, Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Ben Roethlisberger, Kyler Murray, Ryan Tannehill, Daniel Jones, and Drew Lock. I'm probably going to limit the Daniel Jones stuff more after that, but that's a good starting point, I guess. Do you find yourself, how many defenses do you typically play? Is that a spot in your lineup where you kind of just leave it blank and let the optimizer sort it out?
Yes, unless there's something in particular that I want to exploit, and even when that's the case, that usually ends up being chalk, because I'm not smart enough to come up with anything super sneaky. But like if somebody's starting a rookie quarterback from some D2 school against the Ravens or something, it's like, yeah, let's start the Ravens because they're gonna probably knock this kid's head off. But other than that, it's just that's the place where I fill my salary. I also something in like I think you probably have to. I think this is a positive thing, but I obsess over all of these little details of my process, and I continue to go. I'm trying to figure out sort of what the best. So these optimizers for people who aren't familiar often have a randomness component where as the lineup is building after each, it builds one lineup and then it runs your projections with a randomizer variable where it adds, between whatever you set it at percent to that projection, so that you're not running all of your projections with the same, or running all of your lineups with the same exact projections. Sort of incorporates variance into the projections through that. And how to set that randomness variable is something that I've spent an unhealthy amount of time thinking about.
Yeah.
Where I am but I think, and so I've tried a bunch of different approaches with varying success. I think in some ways it doesn't matter if you get the magnitude right. And to that point, sort of all of these different ways that I've sort of thought about potentially doing this end up with the defense being having the most randomness in it, which is supported by all of the stuff that people smarter than me have looked at in terms of the consistency of fantasy defense point production over time. So I usually just set all of my, a long-winded way of saying I set all of my defenses with a super high randomness variable. And I'll typically, that usually leads to me having no more than like 10% of any one defense, given how close they are all in projections.
All right. So I guess we should not go to defense next.
Unless there's something you like, in which case,
but that's what I'm saying. So like the reason I ask is because I don't have a take on defense right now. Like just going through it, like I kind of see like maybe something like Miami could be interesting, because against the Patriots they only gave up 21 points. They were kind of dominated for a lot of the game. The Bills are a run first team to begin with. We talked about them attacking in the same way as how Cam would do it. I guess the thing you have to ask yourself is, how have the Bills performed against the Dolphins in the past? That seems like a pretty interesting idea right there, because the over-under is 41, the spread's 5.5, and it's really all, if it is all about randomness, I guess, yeah, if it's all about randomness, another way that you could try to look at it is, how, if the savings get you from one play to another, how many points does that need to get you on average to justify just taking the cheapest defense, or like an extremely cheap defense that could get you a 0, but it could also, you could back your way into a lucky defensive touchdown, and then not only is the 2100 helping you get from player A to player B, but it's also giving you this stupid amount of points from defense that you're not supposed to get typically.
I think that's the exact way I think about it. If you play a $2,000 defense and they get a pick six, they're at 4x.
Yeah.
Just done. They could give up 35 points, get a 0 for their points, and they're still at 4x. And that's enough that just get the rest of your lineup right, and you have as much money as possible to do it. Mm-hmm. The upside for your players at other positions are 2-3x what your defense's upside is. So you're getting, in your projections, you're not getting where they're focused on average or median value. Your defenses are probably coming in at like 4x, because it's easy to score 9 points as a defense. But if you're thinking about ceiling, then that money is much better spent elsewhere.
Yeah, the times that I have used an optimizer, I typically find myself just getting my number of defenses down to like 3, and it's just like, screw it, like just see what happens.
Yeah.
So,
which is like, if you like the spot the defense is in, that's fine, because I think there's a lot of, to the same point, it's the lowest spread in terms of the different salaries at the position, and so as long as you get a team that gets you 10 or 8, there's usually a build around that will put you near the top.
Yeah. All right. I guess we can go through defense real quick just to kind of think through this. So when you're looking at defenses for other reasons, are you typically looking at like the defense's ability to create turnovers, the opposing team's turnover propensity, the quarterback's like the level of security they have with the ball? So we'll just go game by game and we can kind of think through it. So Detroit and Green.
Yeah, I guess I just on that. I usually I think that the most important thing to me here is offensive line defensive line matchup. If I want, I think pressure leads to turnovers, and if Brandon Thorne, I mentioned either this week or last week on Twitter. Each week will usually he writes a column for establish the run on it, but usually does mentions in his Twitter feed sort of what his favorite O-line, D-line, or what he thinks the biggest mismatches are on the O-line, D-line each week. And so that's something that I stay in tune with, and something that I'll probably more than anything keep in mind when I'm thinking about my defensive plays.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, so I guess I haven't looked at it that way. I'm sure that's a very good way to look at it. So if you have any of those takes,
I think it's like a different way to think about it, and I think in DFS that there's sometimes value in just being different with, being rationally different, just like not like firing off curveballs, but
yeah.
It's an angle to get on a team that somebody else might not be thinking.
Yeah.
about.
So I guess when I'm thinking through this, I'm going to be thinking about, like not can the other team create pressure, but if the other team did create pressure, how is that going to impact this quarterback? Like, is this quarterback already turnover prone and is going to exacerbate that, or is even with pressure, do I think this guy is going to do a good job of controlling or protecting the ball? So like guys like Matt Stafford and Aaron Rodgers, even if they are getting pressured, I don't think I'm going to want to play either of those defenses. I guess it would probably be easier for me to think to myself like Green Bay somehow. I don't even really like the Packers going up against the Lions at all. I can't really see it. Is Matt Stafford typically somebody who throws a bunch of picks? No, right? He's generally pretty good with the ball. And I guess the Lions' easiest way for them to win the game would be to try to slow it down, keep the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands. I can't even really. I just can't really think of a scenario where I would be very excited to play the Packers. Because last week Stafford threw one pick.
I ended up with a little bit of them. So in the lineups I've built so far, the defensive I'm getting a bunch of are the who's this? The Dolphins and the Jets because they're cheap, and then the Cardinals, the Rams, and the Buccaneers. And I don't know why, but that's what I'm up with. It looks like the Buccaneers look like they're supposed to be the chalk defense. Along with maybe the Rams and the Dolphins.
All right, so I'm getting rid of the Lions. I'm getting rid of the Packers. San Francisco, I know we mentioned that earlier. Wouldn't that be a team that fits with the talent disparity between lines? I guess I don't really see myself I can't imagine Sam Darnold throwing a bunch of pick sixes and fumbling, and I feel like they're just going to be so boring and already to begin with because they expect the pressure and they aren't a very good team right now. 4,000 is a lot for a defense too. I'm gonna get rid of San Francisco, and I'll get rid of the Jets. Chicago against the Giants. I mean, Daniel Jones throws a lot. He gives up the ball all the time, even with the new focus on trying to not do that.
So I guess just to maybe just backtrack and just philosophically. So if you built a lineup that you liked and you had 4,000 on the table, would you play you could play any defense? What defense would you play?
So if all of my other positions were locked and I was not allowed to change them, period, and I had to pick a defense, I think, okay, so going through it, The Bears would be interesting because Daniel Jones gives up the ball a decent amount.
And I get where I was going with that is I don't remove any defenses from my player pool. And I just if it fits, put it in, and let the optimizer decide. But I just think I don't think that like it's highly unpredictable which defense will be the highest scoring in any given week. So why try to figure it out?
Yeah. Have you put any have you run any numbers on what a defense needs to score to basically kill everybody else? Like what's that threshold? Like once a team gets over like 20 or something, it's going to kill a lot of lineups that don't have it.
Probably. I mean, I guess I've never tried to quantify that. If you like, I think there's so many variables. Yeah. So it's like tough to do it with any certainty or in a way that's applicable, I guess. But I feel like again, sort of for the reason we mentioned, I feel like because a defense's ceiling is so much lower than any other position, that the likelihood of a defense killing you is like if somebody's going to kill you, it's going to be probably a running back or a running back or a wide receiver, then maybe a quarterback, and then like way down the list, a tight end or a defense. It is, I think, just my sense of probably how likely that is.
Yeah. Okay. So then let's go to tight ends, and we'll just try to run through the games fast. So TJ Hawkinson, I don't think is really somebody that I'm trying to get onto my teams. Nobody from Green Bay. Kittle's out. Jordan Reed at 2,600 is somewhat interesting. Herndon is someone that we've discussed. So do you think this is the point where you should start playing with exposures for tight end? Because right now all I've done is really like limit the exposure to different quarterbacks. So is this the time that I should have my first run and see how it spits everything out?
Yeah. So yeah, I'll typically do that before I start limiting, just because I want to know like who the optimizer will be defaulting to, in essence. But I think that if you know in advance where you want to be at quarterback, then I would do it now. Like and then from there I sort of just go to highest owned, and so that was the first place I went, because I was ending up with Herndon in like 75% of my lineups, even after starting to limit my quarterback exposure. So far I'm sort of like refreshing all my numbers as we do this, and we'll sort of start from the top and make sure facts haven't changed to change someone's projections since I last did it. But that's where I had sort of left it off, that Herndon would be the next guy I was going to limit, just because he was top, my highest owned guy.
Okay. Doyle's out. Mo Alley Cox. So basically, right now I just started going through the games. Jordan Reed, Herndon, Jonnu, Noah Fant, Hayden Hurst. Mo Alley Cox was already getting some work as the backup tight end for the Colts before Jack Doyle went out, and now Jack Doyle is out. So I'll throw him in there. Because I'm going to start just like eliminating players out of the pool, because I don't like a lot of the upside from these guys. So then Gesicki against... Gesicki's in like a tough price range, I think, as well. Fant, Ebron, Jonnu, Gesicki, Jimmy Graham, Logan Thomas, 3,600, Chris Herndon, 3,400. So I don't think Gesicki's going to kill me. I'll probably just eliminate him. The Bills last week didn't give up a ton of work or a ton of points to Herndon. 7 targets. So so something like that. So like I guess one thing that I guess is pretty common for people to do is look at how the team's defense gave up yards and points in the previous week. But with the Jets, that seems like it was the Jets' plan regardless of who they were playing, because Chris Herndon was like one of their 3 best receivers regardless of what team they were playing against. So like seeing that Herndon had 7 targets doesn't make me think that Gesicki's going to get more targets. I guess theoretically Devontae Parker could be out though. If Parker's out, I would.
Yeah,
want
and
Gesicki.
I think the Bills. I mean, they are strong at safety and corner. So there may be a funnel effect there potentially.
All right, so I'll leave that until I know if Devontae Parker is in or not. Travis Kelce's going to make your lineups different out of necessity. And are the Chargers are another team that you mentioned funnel things inside, right?
I don't think so.
Hunter Henry, Mark Andrews. So I ran the first in my first run, I had 100% Devontae Adams. 100% Amari Cooper. So that's not great. But at the same time, I don't have a lot of other like rules restricting how it builds stuff, because like I think that the next thing that I would do just intuitively would be start grouping out my quarterbacks with the players I want on their team, because that's kind of how I'm thinking about first building lineups anyways.
Yeah. So for all of my crunches, I always have some type of and it's sort of the element that I'll run depending on the slate. I'll run sort of like 20 to 50 lineups at 3 to 5 with 3 to 5 different settings, and sort of combine those into one group of 150. All of those will have the like default rules I mentioned earlier, the basic stuff like no running backs from two teams, no quarterbacks, or only one tight end from any given team, things like that. And then the element that I change up in those various iterations are my quarterback stack rules, which will be anything from, at its simplest, a quarterback plus someone from his team. When I'm sort of forcing the most stuff in there, so to speak, I'll have some lineups where I force it to have quarterback 2 players from his team plus one opponent. So force some 4-man stacks in there.
Yep, that's eventually where I think I will end up. Because I think I just have a chronic fancy play syndrome where I want the running back quarterback stacks to be the things that win me money, which is probably a very stupid way to build lineups. So I'm just getting rid of a lot of the players in the tight end pool.
So for reference, this is last 3 years. Excuse me. Every slate with at least 10 games, the maximum players from an individual team on the winning lineup, 2 players, 49% of lineups, 3 players, 44% of lineups, 4 players, 5%, 5 players, 2%. So 3 players or less from any given team makes up 93% of your winners. So I want to have some of those super game stacks, super team stacks, because I don't want to be drawing dead 10% of the time. But the 2-3-mans on these bigger slates are typically the way to go, just because you have so many options. As you drop down in slate size, the chances of sort of just like 2 games going off and wanting to have a bunch of guys from one or the other goes up pretty quickly in what I've looked at.
Is there a target score you're trying to like have your lineups theoretically be able to hit? Is it 5x the salary? Is it like 250? Or it's really like 200, right? Like 215 or something like that.
Yeah, like I don't target it. I'm not. It's not something I think about actively as I'm building my lineups. Just because like if you are going to put up a score in that range, all of the guys in your lineup are going to obliterate their projections. Yeah. So it's more, I think that to me the more important thing are these sort of qualitative, like what's his hypothetical ceiling type thoughts.
And you'll get there anyways. Yeah.
Exactly. Like I think there's no way for me to look at like the projections on a piece of paper and say, is this like a 225 point lineup or a 250 point lineup, right? It's like, I don't know, it looks like a good one and it'll hopefully be somewhere up there. But it is something I have just like data on for historical stuff. So 2 to 4 games on the slate, average winning score is 195. Between 5 and 9 games, 240, and between 10 and 16 games, 240. So basically, as soon as you get to 5 games, you're looking at 240 to win it, basically.
Okay. All right. So I pared down my tight end list. I didn't put any other like limiters on top of that, but let's go to running back. So since we talked about how like running back quarterback isn't a very highly correlated component of your lineup, are you just looking for the best plays, the best like point per dollar plays, and the optimizer is going to like build around that basically for you, like where you're just getting different combinations of running backs?
Yes. So I think it's sort of the like second, whether you want to go there or you're not, or a wide receiver outside of your stack. But to me, that's sort of like the second biggest cog in your lineup.
What quarterback?
The running
quarterback
back.
One, right? Running back two.
Like just in terms of like your over like in terms of what defines the contours of your lineup. I think it's sort of like the way I just think about it is, your quarterback wide receiver stack. So like those are my Cam Newton lineups. Those are my Drew Brees lineups, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. To me, like the second element of those lineups is your running back. I think I'm just sort of like trying to come up with a artful way of saying what you said. That's where I go as like it's an independent variable, but the second most important variable in how I'm building my lineups.
Yeah. Okay. So let's think about some running back plays. We did this a little bit yesterday. So like Aaron Jones against Detroit.
And so maybe maybe this is easier since I've done some of this already. And then you can go do your thing, but just so you have for reference. Mm-hmm. So where I am right now, and so this is again without caps, and I think I already mentioned that some of these guys are guys I'm going to want to get off of a little bit. But my top 5 at running back, 53% Jonathan Taylor, 35% Derrick Henry, 28% Melvin Gordon, 24% Ronald Jones, 22% Zeke Elliott. I like Henry and Elliott. I also like Gordon, but I think there is blowout potential there. So I'm going to probably stay, closer to the field on him. Rojo is a guy I want to look into a little bit. He scares me, even though he had a good week 1. I think it might be a trap. Mm-hmm. And Jonathan Taylor, I like Nyheim Hines better. But so those are my top 5 right now.
Okay, so how many running backs are in your pool right now? Well, not your pool, in your 150 that your last crunch that you've done. How many running backs did you have exposure to?
Right now, I own. Hold on. So I own. Right now, I have 22 guys that I have on lineups. I have 27 running backs in my player pool.
Okay.
The lowest projected guy in my player pool is Adrian Peterson. and so it's not just based on like whether I exclude a guy is based on his projected carries, projected targets, and projected points. There's that like I make sure he clears a certain threshold in all three of those categories for me. And so the lowest or the highest projected running back that is not in my player pool is Mark Ingram.
Mark Ingram.
I keep it pretty tight at running back, even though 2017 is big. Guys like Mark Ingram, Benny Snell, Myles Gaskin that aren't expected to get a lot of passing game work usually fail my targets test.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing to kind of take into consideration for how I'm looking at these lineups when I'm building them is it's 150 lineups, yeah, but it's in the mini max, so like $75. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd be shooting myself in the foot if I don't think that I would want to shoot myself in the foot if I lost all of it. So if I have like an extremely tight core and I lose, I'm like, okay. That's basically like one or two PGA lineups. Like what's like I'm not going to cry myself to sleep. I like being risky.
And I think that, I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to think about it. And in some ways, I think, especially with the mini max, as someone who's played them like nightly in a bunch of sports for a long time, is I think that's the view a lot of people take. And so you'll see crazy lineups, and if someone hits one of those, you can end up with really long tails. In terms of what it takes to win. So sometimes like to get there, you need to do that because so many other people in the tournament are doing that. And not just the people who are maxing it out, the guys who are throwing in a 50-cent lineup, right? Like DJF, like just throw anybody in there.
So, okay. So I guess actually, let's just keep going through the pool because I think eventually I'll get to the point where I decide like what part of my lineups I want to be the most restrictive. Like, do I want to go 3 quarterbacks? Do I want to have really tight wide receiver pool or something like that? So Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, Adrian Peterson, I don't really love any of those plays. I don't think I'll end up on them. Mostert is interesting with the big play upside. And if they try to kill off the game, that could be nice, but I am afraid of Tevin Coleman and Jerick McKinnon getting some of those touches, so I don't love that play very much or at all. I love Saquon. I'm definitely going to have Saquon. I think that it's a good contrarian play. Let's see. What is he listed at right now? 4.4%. That seems pretty low. And Detroit did well last week against Chicago in the run game, right? 140 yards.
Peterson had a really nice game. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I like Saquon. Do you have a strong feeling on either running back from the Bears?
I don't usually play Cohen, especially in a game where I think it's going to be close. I kind of like Montgomery. I want to like Montgomery this week. My sort of head likes Montgomery, but he's not making it in my lineups based on projections, and so might try to get a little bit of him, but I'm sort of trusting the numbers rather than my gut on this one.
Yeah. So the Giants gave up 140 yards on the ground, basically to Benny Snell. I guess James.
Right. I think the biggest difference there, and I actually don't know much about the Bears' offensive line, is probably that. I think you put anybody behind the Steelers' offensive line, they can probably grind out some yards, even without the Castro. They look pretty good.
All right. The Eagles and the Rams. Malcolm Brown. Some guy tried trading Malcolm Brown to me today or yesterday. I said no, but am I crazy for saying no? How do you think that this is going to be a long-term thing with Malcolm Brown, or is Cam Akers scaring you away from Malcolm Brown?
I think Malcolm Brown's the guy this week. I think it might be a trap.
Long-term.
not a trap long term. I think it might be a trap this week for DFS. I think that the Rams passing game is the better play here, and would expect Akers to get more work as the season goes on. Just they used a high draft pick on him. They don't do that for no reason, and I don't think a guy not coming in week one and having a bell cow role is an indication that he's not what they expected. But Malcolm Brown is a guy that's been like there for a long time. They I don't think he would have. I don't think he would still be there and outlasted all the guys he's outlasted in that backfield if there wasn't something they saw in him. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I don't know who you were, asked to give up for him, but I don't mind getting Malcolm. Yeah, I probably wouldn't do that. Yeah. But I would expect that, like, if I would say that I'm pretty confident Malcolm Brown will be the 1A running back in the backfield through at least like week 6, maybe week 8. After that, I'd say all bets are off, and maybe Akers gets a bigger role.
Yeah, that's ultimately what scared me off. What do you think about Miles Sanders? Did you say that you had much of him in your player in your exposure?
He's in my player pool right now. I'm at 2%. I don't love it. He's an average play. I think the Rams defensive line is good, and Aaron Donald's a beast, so that always gives me a little bit of pause. I think the offensive line for the Eagles on the interior is still a big question mark. Guard, and I think Boston Scott will remain involved in some capacity, and that they're going to keep getting Corey Clement some work. And so if this was a 2-man backfield, then I think, or if it turns into a 3-man backfield, even if it's 10% for Clement, it's probably coming out of Sanders' workload rather than Scott's, would be my guess, just given the way the Eagles have done things in the past.
All right, so yeah, I don't love Miles Sanders, but it's an interesting play. I guess it's really scary because he's coming off the injury, and maybe like the game gets out. Maybe he re-aggravates. Maybe the game gets out of control, and they're just like, screw it. We don't need to use Miles Sanders anymore because they're winning by so much or losing by so much. So I guess that is probably a stay away. And then in terms of that,
they do get Lane. The Eagles do get Lane Johnson back, which will be a big help to the offensive line.
Okay, so Miles Sanders against Todd Gurley straight up.
I'd probably take Sanders.
Sanders against Jonathan Taylor. You're on Jonathan Taylor. Sanders against David Johnson.
David Johnson.
Okay, because you're right in that range of salary. So like Jonathan
Gurley's super close. Like I own more of Gurley right now, but I like looking at it. I think I like Sanders better as a play, for no particular reason.
Because you're an Eagles fan. So 8 point
more just because I owned a bunch of Gurley during his like prime years in keeper leagues, and then like had to watch him slowly break down. So I'm just like scarred from that experience, I think. So I'm just very like I think Todd Gurley is gonna break every time someone touches him because of my PTSD from my Gurley days.
So Sanders has 8.9% projected ownership. Do you have him in that range as well?
This has him at 5.6, but one of I combine Osmos with UFC's UF Collective, and I haven't refreshed the UF Collective stuff since like Wednesday, so that's probably different now.
I see.
That's what I'm doing right now, slowly but surely. So I might have a better numbers for you on that stuff by the time we're done.
So so let's just do the if then game. So if Miles Sanders is 8% owned, is there an amount of ownership that you would want to get in an ideal world, or would you let the optimizer kind of have at it?
I would more the latter. And I kind of do it like a waterfall. So I will start by capping the ownership on those 5 guys I mentioned up top that I currently have the most exposure to. And we'll see sort of what running backs the optimizer spills that ownership onto instead. And if Sanders is the guy, and the optimizer likes him the same as the next, among the group that we just talked about, for example, then I'll roll with that. If the optimizer prefers the guy that the other guy, then I'll sort of force a little bit more Sanders in there. But my sort of gauge for things is usually find my guys and sort of my core, and the ownership percentage there is really just dictated by my confidence level. So I'll go 90% if I think a guy is a lock to get the usage and just sort of have that injury buffer. Once I get past that core of guys that I have in maybe 20% of my lineups, then I'm just looking at sort of where the field is at and trying to be a quarter above or below, depending on whether that guy is whether I like him or don't like him or feel better or worse about him. But sort of my philosophy there is, once I get past those guys that I don't have a strong feeling about, it's, coin toss. So let's just get a little bit of everybody, get wider exposure and just sort of tweak it a little bit to try to be above on guys I like and below on guys that I don't like, recognizing that my feelings aren't particularly strong in those cases.
Okay. So for a week like this, is Jonathan Taylor a player that you're going to kind of need to take a stand? Well, not need to take a stand on, but you'll need to decide like over, under with the field?
Yeah. And so for there, where I know that that's a guy that, it's a chalky guy that I don't feel as strongly about as the average Joe, it seems. My restriction on him will be, going to be half of what he's projected at. Do I want to be 3/4? Do I want to be 1/3? Rather than just sort of picking a number out of thin air. The other way, if I'm doing the latter and sort of just trying to get, I guess sort of maybe like a stress test is maybe a way to think about this, is to me is like, how many lineups am I willing to kill by playing this guy?
Yeah.
Like especially with 150, I think that it's in some ways helpful to think about it as a war of attrition, right? You just need one of these lineups to win, and that's the goal.
Yeah.
If the other 149 don't cash, who cares? That'll make you money in the long run and a lot of it. So, I don't think it really applies to like Jonathan Taylor, but it's something I do a lot. For example, with a low on play in NBA, I might like, like how many, like if JaMychal Green only puts up 2 points, like, do I want 50 lineups to die because of that? Do I want 25 lineups to die because of that? I think that can be a helpful way to think about, to just sort of, put a third rail on me versus the field.
Yeah, so in that scenario, how many of my lineups would I let my fear of Jonathan Taylor going off force me into owning, and as a result, all those lineups die? Because it seems like for me it feels like a fear-based thing right now with Jonathan Taylor, because he doesn't seem like a good play to me.
It's essentially like what percentage of the time do you think Jonathan Taylor is going to put up 20 fantasy points this week, or 25 fantasy points?
Well, is it 20 or 25? Because like those are the ones that will make him not kill your lineup, but that's not the number where it's like he's going to kill all of your other lineups that don't have him, you know?
Sorry, I was thinking he was closer to 5K. So yeah, he probably needs 30 where he's like unavoidable.
Where he's Thanos.
And I think that number's pretty low, which is why I think he's a decent fade.
That's where I'm leaning right now. I'm gonna get rid of him for now, and we'll see how that goes. Because I mean, if it's like, I'm basically making a $75 bet, Jonathan Taylor is not gonna score 30 points. So, actually, do you ever look at player prop stuff? Like as
I think it's a valuable piece, but just sort of never have time. Usually end up wasting time doing other stuff.
Sure. All right. So I right now I got to the Atlanta game. So Zeke and Todd Gurley are both interesting to me. Dalvin Cook. He's got the red number next to his name in DraftKings. That seems kind of important. Right now he's projected for 4.6%. I'll take some Dalvin Cook. Because you can justify that just as a volume play, right? Like, because that's the thing. Like, Dalvin Cook, even in games where Madison gets more touches than you think he probably should, Dalvin Cook's workload will be very similar to Jonathan Taylor's.
Mm-hmm.
He's a lot more expensive, but if it's like because like if you get into a spot where it's a 2v2 where it's like Jonathan Taylor plus Devontae Adams against Dalvin Cook plus a low 6,000 wide receiver, like Allen Robinson, Mike Evans, Robert Woods, DJ Moore. I think I like the Dalvin Cook, all those Dalvin Cook ones. Like, yeah. Do you ever build lineups according to what you think like a chalky build is going to be, and then going like 2v2 against it as a way to get tournament leverage?
I think it's a bad idea. I don't personally do it though.
Yeah, because yeah, I mean, there's so many entries in these fields. I guess you can't really lock it down to that level. But just thinking about it from like a ranges perspective, like if the range of most of the popular plays for quarterback are going to be between 5,500 and 7,000, then like I'm trying to think. Like it's a futile exercise, obviously, right now in my brain because I can't think through it the entire way. But it's like if the ownership projections are pretty close, then can you kind of average out the amount of salaries ascribed to each position and then figure out which 2v2s are going to be the most impactful, or like which plays would actually give you the most leverage? I guess there's a simpler way to do it. Would just be look at the high owned plays and then find a play you like better. It's like I said, it's really just not even probably worthwhile thinking about it. Singletary, Moss, Howard, Breda, Gaskin. I'm probably not playing any of those guys. Kenyon Drake, not interested really. How much passing work did he get, or receiving work?
Who?
Kenyon Drake. Last week.
Not a bunch. If I
So
remember right.
last week, do you think the Eagles had something to do with the Redskins not having a great day on the ground? Like Peyton Barber, 17 attempts, 29 yards, 2 touchdowns. Antonio Gibson, 9 attempts, 36 yards, and only had 2 targets out of the backfield. That could be a game script thing, right? Because they got up so early.
It could be. So the Eagles were playing from like you said, the Eagles got up early, so that contributes. And the Eagles were plus defense against the run last year, in part because they were so bad against the pass. But they were above league average in total running back 1/2 games allowed and -2 PPR points allowed to running backs on average. So I think that I think the way to attack the Eagles is through the air. And that you're right, the game script probably exacerbated that.
Yeah. I think I like Antonio Gibson as a play this week as like a bounce back spot. You can't project Antonio Gibson to have a 70-yard receiving touchdown like what Mostert did. But if Arizona plays similarly, what do you think about Arizona's defense? How have teams attacked them?
We mentioned last year they were they just bled at the tight end position.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which was the main thing, and they were they slowed down as the season went on, and I didn't look at what their pace numbers were in week 1, the Cardinals that is, but they were seeing that early in the year last season had like a ton of 3 and outs, and so teams were, I think running backs were putting up good numbers just because teams had the ball so much against them.
I see. All right. Next game was Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Austin Eckler, Josh Kelly. Do you have any takes on the Chargers backfield situation? Do you think that was an aberration, or is Josh Kelly going to get half the touches?
I don't know. I think he's going to be involved. And the thing that concerned me more is the passing game work. From an Austin Eckler perspective, he had maybe one or two targets, and Kelly had more than that. So I think Austin Eckler can still hit value as long as he's the passing down guy there. From a Chargers perspective overall, my only real takeaway that I'm assuming is right from week 1 is I think they're just going to run the ball a ton. So I think even if Eckler's getting half the backfield work, that there's going to be a lot of it to go around. So that's maybe okay. But probably hurts, especially Keenan Allen, who we talked about the other day, who sort of needs those targets to do his thing.
What do you think about Eckler against Mostert?
I'd rather play Eckler.
Yeah, because those are I did like playing running backs against the Chiefs a lot last year. It seemed like a
they've now that you mention it, I think they've probably have a stat on this,
because the traditional how to beat a really good team, how to beat a really good quarterback thing lines up with how to play against the Chiefs, and also fits with how Los Angeles wants to attack, which is through the running game.
Yeah. Receiving backs in particular have done really well against the Chiefs in the past 2 years. And last year they were, they got better as the year went on, but really struggled against the run early on. So I think you combine playing elite offense with that seeming to be their offensive identity to begin with, and I think again, sort of bring it full circle, that the concern for Eckler is if he's not going to get a lot of the passing game work in the backfield, or even splits it, and the Chargers fall behind, then he's not as great of a play. But if you assume that he will get back into that receiving role in a different game script, which I think is a safe assumption just given his talent as a receiver, then he feels pretty game script proof in this one to me. If the Chargers can keep it close, then they'll keep feeding the ground game. But if they fall behind, then there should be room in the passing game for him to pay off that way.
Sounds about right. Okay, so I think the last thing that I wanted to take a look at is with wide receivers. The thing that we talked about yesterday was the wide receivers that generally will be able to win you a contest are like the wide receivers that are generally popular, and for one reason or another they're like under 5% or like in that 5% range. So let's talk through some of the players that are right around 5% or under 5%. So I'll list some of mine because I have it right in front of me, and then you can let me know what players you think are right around that range that you're interested in. So I'm looking at it right here, and we have DJ Moore at 7, Will Fuller at 6.5, Mike Williams at 6, Terry McLaurin at 5.8, Robert Woods at 5, Marquise Brown at 4, Tyreek Hill is 3.5. That seems pretty insane. I guess if a lot of the expensive running backs become popular plays, then yeah, Tyreek Hill kind of gets squeezed out. Cooper Kupp's really low. Juju Smith-Schuster's really low. DJ Chark's really low. Are there any that jump out to you?
So I'm just looking at Tyreek Hill's game log. So I don't know if he got hurt in this game or something, but most recent game against the Chargers, 2 targets, 0 catches. Week 1 last year, 5 targets. I'm sorry, week 17 last year, 5 targets, 4 catches, 61 yards. 2018 against the Chargers, blew up in week 1 and then got held to 7 catches, 4 touchdowns, or 7 targets, 4 catches, 46 yards in week 15. So we've had a couple weak games against the Chargers in a row, and I'm pulling it up now. I had not noticed that before, but it was interesting to me because Hill was the top guy on my list. And I want to see who's been covering him for the Chargers. They have a very talented secondary, and I feel like this is a narrative that I forgot about, that like Jason Verrett might be a Tyreek Hill kryptonite.
And then what, they picked up Chris Harris.
Yeah, so Verrett's not there anymore. 2019 wasn't there. Or was it it might be Casey Hayward. Actually, I think I might got that wrong. Like game 19.
All right, so I just did another run, and like I said, I haven't created my groups, which is what I'm probably gonna do next, off stream and everything. But it's still like overloading me with tons of Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper, Derrick Henry. Not necessarily plays that I absolutely love. Like I'd probably want like, because I was just looking at the weather. It's apparently going to be windy tomorrow, or it might be windy tomorrow in Green Bay. Devontae Adams already really chalky, coming off of a gigantic week. I'd probably want to have between 20 to 30 lineups max with Devontae Adams, and like maybe that's what I would do is I'd have all of my Devontae Adams exposure with Aaron Rodgers. So like if the weather take is wrong, I'll not be dead. If the weather angle is not, yeah, basically yeah, that's how I want. I want like 20 to 30 lineups with Devontae Adams.
Yeah. So I haven't changed my opinion. I'm still from yesterday. At this point I'm still gonna try to get as much Devontae Adams as I can. Mm-hmm. Right now I'm at 42%. I'd be fine going higher than that.
Yeah.
5% or less plays. Right now the guys I have the most of, Mike Williams 14%, Will Fuller 10%. Christian Kirk is at 7.5 in what I'm looking at, but I really like Christian Kirk this week.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The other thing or something else I noticed after we talked is that he was running basically all of it. It seems so. The Niners don't shadow, right? Richard Sherman stays on one side of the field all the time. And the Cardinals last week, it seems, ran Kirk to that side every single play and or every single passing play, and made sure that DeAndre Hopkins was matched up against whoever wasn't Richard Sherman on the field. And I think that might explain or be another sort of piece of the explanation of why Hopkins did what he did and Kirk did what he did. Is sort of the Niners' stubbornness there. So as you know, they play teams where the other side is more willing to do things specifically to stop Hopkins. You got to think Kirk will get more involved. So I think it just furthers the same point we made. Yeah. Beyond that, Marquise Brown, I also like. Adam Humphries, Robert Woods, I also like. And DJ Chark, who's another guy you mentioned yesterday. I'm very slightly above the field on him, but I think I'm going to try to get a little more.
Who is your favorite wide receiver play right now, other than Devontae Adams? Christian Kirk? I think Christian Kirk's probably my favorite play. I do like the Allen Robinson play. I do like Mike Evans, but Kirk seems like the best value that also has huge tournament upside. 4,300, that's just wild.
My favorite, T.Y. Hilton would be my favorite. He's only at 3% right now, but he's a guy that I really like. I haven't capped any of my wide receiver ownership yet, so I'm getting a ton of Corey Davis, who I want to fade this week, and I'm getting a ton of Deontay Johnson, who I want to be, I don't have a particularly strong feeling about. So just I think a lot of musical chairs for me in terms of my wide receiver ownership around.
All right.
I think this Minnesota secondary wasn't very good last year. On paper has gotten worse, and I just think pendulum swing from Campbell last week to Hilton this week.
So you're saying from? What do you mean?
Last week,
Campbell.
Paris Campbell got a bunch of targets and was sort of the guy in the passing game. Maybe people forget about Hilton a little bit.
Yeah. All right, cool. So that is pretty helpful. I'm going to go through a lot of my groups and stuff like that off stream. I don't think I'll be around later today, but I'll hit you up later today or tomorrow. And we'll see
that sounds good. Yeah, and then I think since we've talked about this a bunch, I'm planning on at some point, right after lock tomorrow, I will post my ownerships on Twitter for the 0 people that care. Just to sort of, I think it might just be interesting, if only for me, sort of to see how close where I actually end up is to all the stuff we've talked about.
Yep. All right. Cool.